A pastoral letter to the Presbytery of San Jose, Friday, 21st February 2025, on executive orders. Dear siblings in the faith, colleagues in ministry, and friends of the Presbytery of San Jose, grace and peace in the name of the Holy God, revealed in Jesus Christ our Liberator, in the transformative breath of Holy Spirit. This week, specifically February 19th, marks the 83rd year since the fateful signing of and issuance by President Franklin Roosevelt's of Executive Order 9066. On that day, through the stroke of a pen, the President directed hundreds of thousands of Japanese Americans to be forcibly detained, separated from their homes and families, and imprisoned at a series of internment camps in the western United States. And I have attached here some photos Grace and I took when we visited one of those camps, Manzanar, a couple years back. As many of you know, I grew up in San Bruno, California. Our family frequented the Tanforan Mall, which was once upon a time a racetrack. Manzanar has an exhibit that described how that same Tanforan racetrack was used as one of several processing centers where Japanese Americans would be registered and then shipped off to any one of a number of internment camps. These fellow citizens were not afforded due process, not regarded with dignity as human beings, and subjected to the suspicion and terror of the federal government, all in the name and under the pretext of national security and preserving American interest. This is day 33 into this new presidential administration. The sheer volume and velocity of executive orders being issued by President Trump and being implemented has created a situation of chaos, fear, and fomented conditions where real lives are being adversely affected. Migrant communities are vulnerable more than they were already. LGBTQIA+ persons' identities have been eviscerated. Constitutional checks and balances that provided a semblance of trust in our institutions are now questionable. Global alliances are threatened. American foreign policy that challenged dictators are now kowtowing to those same dictators. U.S. foreign aid that provided needed food and medicines to impoverished communities around the world has all but ceased. And the list goes on and on by the minute. It becomes overwhelming, and there are some days where I wonder what to do next and how to respond. Because the revolutionary changes that the new presidential administration is enacting through the series of executive orders will transform government for years, now is not the time to rest, and certainly not the time to tune out and approach this moment with apathetic resignation. I am prompted by Holy Spirit to press into the Apostle Paul's exhortation in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 8 through 12. Quote, "We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying around in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be made visible in our bodies. For we who are living are always being handed over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may also be made visible in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you." Close quote. Here, the apostle is addressing both internal and external challenges to the church's witness in the first century Common Era. Yet we see visibly before us in 2025 the pernicious values of empire rearing its ugly head, where an unelected billionaire walks with his team from agency to agency, terminating civil servants, accessing sensitive information, and doing so with impunity. The brazenness of this administration is emboldened not only by his interpretation of the Supreme Court's decision last year affirming the president's near total immunity from prosecution provided such acts were done as part of official acts and duties of the president. But the brazenness is further emboldened when he views his political mandate on some illusory imprimatur from God. We who are students and teachers of history have seen this script play out in human history. Pharaohs, emperors, monarchs, despots, presidents, religious leaders, the constellation of political, religious, and economic leaders who saw their right to rule in dictatorial ways as part of a divine mandate, that somehow they are the anointed person from God. Thus, the Church's witness of the gospel and of the loving justice of God must be brought to bear in every moment, and certainly on these perilous times. Now is not the time to rest and retreat, but to confront, interrogate, challenge, and protest the powers and principalities when the vulnerable and disenfranchised are threatened, when hate and fear are instilled into the lives of people, when the values of empire are lifted above the well-being of the poor, the refugee, when fellow human beings and their identities are disregarded. We give witness of our faith of the one, Jesus the Christ, whose divine mandate to us, whose executive order to all people was and is to love. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love neighbor and stranger as Christ loved us. Period. Full stop. I'm not experiencing and seeing that executive order in the president's executive order, whether Roosevelt's in 1942 nor Trump's in 2025. For us in the Presbytery of San Jose, living out Christ's executive order to love will mean many things in the context of Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, and Monterey counties. It will mean, for example, being and providing sanctuary to the vulnerable, accompanying people through the legal process for protection, advocacy through the legal and political processes, street and neighborhood protest, community organizing and coalition building, challenging and critiquing policies and the implementation of them, listening to the heart of fellow neighbors and strangers who live in fear, listening to the heart of those with whom we disagree, loving neighbor and stranger alike, praying, discerning for wisdom when to act publicly and when to act subversively. We are a community of faith, and as such, we are called to pray for one another, to support each other, to join our hearts, voices, and lives for the work and witness of Jesus Christ, so that the God of love and the love of God may be lifted up in our midst. These are perilous times to which we have been called for such a time. May the steadfast love of God inspire us and enable us to bear witness in word, in deed, in prayer, and in every way of the divine executive order to love. In the one who is our joy and love, I'm the Reverend Dr. Neal D. Presa, Executive Presbyter, Presbytery of San Jose.